Hi, I'm Tammy. The purpose of the Tammy North Show is to give high achievers actionable content to propel themselves to senior leadership while living a balanced life. Women leading within corporations and government organizations who want to perform with authenticity at the senior executive level have found their community. I tell stories about my background all the time, but in this episode, I'm going to delve a little bit deeper than normal. And the main reason I'm doing this is that I think it will help you with challenges that you might be dealing with. So I'm going to start with a little bit from my childhood. And this is going to be a super high level synopsis. I could probably write a book on almost every sentence I'm going to say for the next 3 or 4 minutes. But if I really explained the full experience, what I learned, and how it made me who I am today, I would definitely have multiple potential books. So we're just going to skim over the top, this very high level. And I just want to let you know that the most important things I learned is the power of forgiveness, of understanding, and grace for others. So I grew up in a small farm town on the Colorado Plains, and I was the oldest child of a couple who got married too young. My parents got divorced when I was in 3rd grade, and I continued to live with my mom and my baby sister while my mom went through stepping into the workforce. She was trying to figure out how to survive and how to provide a good life for us. We saw our dad every other weekend. He was going through his own growth cycle. Oftentimes, I was the person that my mom talked to about her thoughts and troubles, and I was the one that she counted on to help with many other things. I still remember the day in the car when my dad was talking to my sister and I. We were somewhere in the country, and he told us he was moving out. And I remember how that day felt. I still remember the exact look of the entire scene. It was so surprising. I could not comprehend it. I live in a family with a lot of very strong women, and as such, back in the 1970s and the 80s, especially in a small town, we didn't know everything we know now. So parents did the best they could. And I won't go into all the details, but there were lots of fights, lots of screaming, and so much strong emotion. But luckily, it also included strong love, and I think that's how we got through. As I got older, both of my parents remarried really good people, so I have a great stepmom and a great stepdad, and I consider myself really lucky. As I progressed through school, my first real high school boyfriend ended up in a drug rehab and became physically abusive, and that was a lot to handle for a 17-year-old. And once I was able to deal with that and I was free from the experience, it was also very educational, and I'm super thankful for my parents in that situation. Eventually, I enlisted in the Navy because I had a high desire to get out of that town, and I didn't know how else I would make that happen. So history often repeats itself, and as a result, I didn't learn the lessons from my parents. I got married too young, got divorced, and by the time I was 24, I was a single mom too, a single mom in the Navy. I could have gotten out of the Navy at that point, but what was I going to do? Go back to my hometown? So that began 18 years of challenges that I was able to navigate and find my way through. Along the way, I think when my daughter was a baby, I was diagnosed with possible multiple sclerosis that eventually turned into a full-blown multiple sclerosis diagnosis. So I've been dealing with MS for most of the last 25 years. And that would have been another reason to get out of the Navy. The Navy almost made that decision for me, which is a much longer story, but I was able to get through that. And yeah, I could have let the Navy decide to medically retire me or whatever they say, but I just kept thinking, then what? Yeah, that would have also been easier at the time. All I could think about was my future, and more importantly, my daughter's future. And I could not see a path to a really long-term better place unless I stayed on my course and I kept trying and kept fighting to stay in the Navy, to keep growing, and to build us a strong foundation. So that's what I did. Oh my goodness, I made so many mistakes along the path, and there were so many really hard times when I had no idea if I would be okay. The only thing that mattered, though, was that I simply refused to quit. I refused to give up. And eventually, I completed my bachelor's degree, and I actually received a commissioning in the United States Navy as a naval officer. And around that time, things started to dramatically improve. But that didn't happen until about the age about 30. I was able to raise my daughter to be a successful young lady, and she's going to graduate this year from San Diego State University with a computer science degree. And she's already working and making way more than I did until I was 30. She's very self-aware, she's strong and lovable, and I'm hoping she's going to be the one to change the cycle. But that's too much pressure to put on one person. So our thing is, we say this every time we leave each other, have the day you have. It's a quote quote from a sweet movie, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. So if you haven't seen that movie, go watch it. It'll just warm your heart. So now I'll say to you, my wish for her is, have the life you have, sweet girl. Have the life you have. All I know is I'm rooting for her big time. So a few months ago, I read the book called Super Normal, The Untold Story of Adversity and Resilience by Dr. Meg Jay. I actually read it 2 times. In this book, she included a long list of the most common adversities that children and teens endure. She wrote, if you're wondering if you might have been one of those children or teens, the children or teens that had a childhood adversity, then ask yourself the following questions. Before the age of 20, did you lose a parent? Did you lose a sibling? Were your parents divorced? Did one of your parents or siblings die? Did a parent or sibling often swear at you? Did they put you down? Did they humiliate you? Did they isolate you? Did they act in a way that made you feel afraid? Did you live with a parent or a sibling who was a problem drinker or who abused other drugs? Were you ever bullied by or afraid of kids at school or in your neighborhood? Did you live with an adult or a sibling who struggled with mental illness or some other serious illnesses or special needs? Did a parent or a sibling often push, grab, slap, throw something at you, hit you so hard you had bruises, marks, other injuries? Did you live in a home where you went without clean clothes or enough to eat? Maybe you couldn't afford to go to the doctor. Maybe you had nobody to protect you, or you felt that way anyway. Did somebody in your household go to jail? Did a parent, sibling, or another person at least 5 years older touch your body in a sexual way or ask you to do something similar to them? Was a parent or sibling in your household sometimes kicked, hit, slapped, or even threatened with a weapon? That's a vast list of childhood adversities that you may have gone through. Dr. J says that usually each of these adversities are considered individually. How many kids are physically abused? How many kids are bullied? How many kids have been in a home with a divorce? They're all individual. And each one of them make up a certain percentage. However, the percentages may not seem like an entire population, for instance, but some studies in the United States and even around the world suggest that if you consider all of those that I read, that up to 75% of children and teens are exposed to at least one of these events, and many of them are exposed to more. Because, one problem leads to another problem and to another problem. And as we know, I'm sure that when I went through that list, many of you probably heard something about your childhood in that list. Many young people, very much like yourself, grow up and do very well in the world. They don't do well in spite of the difficulties they've known, but according to research, that they may be doing well because of the adversities that they've known. The people who've come through these situations and end up as high achievers in their younger years were frequently the family heroes. Family heroes are often counted on to save the day at home or at school. One trauma expert, Julia Siegel, actually calls them unbreakable children. Dr. J says these family heroes cannot simply be normal. They must be super normal. If they're good enough or smart enough or kind enough or they work hard enough, then maybe everything will be okay. Family heroes always seem to be saving somebody, even if it's only themselves. They become the strong one in a bunch. Their job is to be the helpful one at home and the successful one in the world. They become honor students, class presidents. Their achievements become extreme. Their achievements bring distinction and positive attention to their loved ones. Some of these children with so many childhood adversities become star athletes, accomplished artists. They have rows and rows of trophies. Their talents offset the troubles around. And others of them become activists and doctors who set out to do good in the world. And even though such a high percentage of achievers may have overcome some serious adversity, their smiles and laughter often camouflage the contrast between what others see of the family hero and then what the family hero might feel. And some of the things they feel, they have extreme pressure of always having to be the strong one. And they also feel different from others. They feel like they're the only ones that have gone through any adversity. They feel kind of crazy, damaged, alone. How many of these resonate with you? Worried, exhausted, helpless, hopeless. They're always on the alert, waiting for something to go wrong. They're suspicious. They're afraid. They're guilty. They feel bad because maybe they aren't doing enough, that they could be doing more, even though they are literally the ones doing so much. They're withdrawn. They feel others judge them. They feel awkward. They feel hurt, lonely, empty, sometimes suicidal. They feel perfectionistic. In order to hide the pain that they feel, they must make everything absolutely perfect. They're angry. They feel old. They have a lot of self-pity. They're closed off from the world, out of control, depressed, pitied, misunderstood, ashamed, agitated, sometimes unable to concentrate, and stupid. Even though they're the same ones with the rows of trophies. They're the same ones who are class presidents. They're homecoming queens. They have PhDs. They are CEOs of companies. And this is how they feel because of their childhood. But then those same people, even though that might be how they feel sometimes, and on the outside they're smiling and confident, or they seem confident to others, they kind of put this mask on, they're also extremely resilient. And even though they feel like they're different from everybody else, that's the importance that Dr. J wanted to point out in this book, is that long list of adversities brings up very similar feelings. And so therefore, 75% of the people in the world might feel that way to some degree. So you are not alone. That's one of the most important things. You are not alone. Probably everybody around you, or most of the people around you, are going through some form of these thoughts at different times in their life. So then she talks about that these same people also have so many qualities that make them extremely resilient. And resilience is one of the key attributes required to become highly successful. So let's talk about some qualities that make a person resilient. They might have average intelligence. Yeah, average. They could be pleasant or engaging. They have good problem-solving skills, high self-control. They're very independent, self-confident. They have very good communication skills, a sense of humor, a lot of determination. And they have a strong ability to form friendships. They're optimistic, they're attractive, and attractive meaning, that others want to be around you and you kind of attract relationships to you. They have a sense of faith or meaning that gives them hope. They're very conscientious, and they have some talent or hobby that attracts the attention of others as well. So one of the key interesting things that Dr. J talked about in this book is that most of these people with adversities found somebody. There was somebody that took a special interest in them, that this person could rely on to talk to give feedback to, who thought they were special in some way, and then kept pulling them through and getting them to the next step. And this could be different people throughout your life, but if you think back on your life, there's been people, maybe a special teacher, maybe a mentor, maybe somebody who believed in you, a family member, a grandmother. I had a grandmother that really did that for me, I think. Just somebody that you just loved you unconditionally, and no matter what kind of turmoil was going on, just pulled you through, and the thought of them kept you going. Yes, it's highly likely that you are one of these people that had adversity, that you're one of these family heroes. And what Dr. J calls them is super normal. Because you know how I mentioned they were only of average intelligence and other things. They didn't have some just out of this world crazy talent, intelligence, or anything. They were just average people. But because of their resilience and their ability to get through these situations and their ability to push on and persevere and build relationships and all of these things, to be so strong that they were normal, but they became super normal. So let's talk about 10. So that's what I want you to think about yourself. If you're one of the people that had any of these adversities in the past, then you are probably super normal. So let's talk about the 10 superpowers that a super normal person will have. One is the ability to make something out of nothing. You essentially have the ability to pull a rabbit out of a hat. One of the renowned resilience researchers, Ann Maston, said that these resilient children don't have superpowers, but instead they have the power of the ordinary. They have everyday attributes that can be found in minds, families, communities, and they essentially make something out of nothing. They make a lot out of a little. It's just like they pulled a rabbit out of a hat. The second one is they have a fighting spirit. They're vulnerable, but invincible. When some adults looked in retrospect back onto their childhood, what they understood was that for their success, the majority reported that determination and a fighting spirit was our most important asset. Another one of their powers was they learned to battle situations and not people. For the family hero, to fight often means to attack a problem. Rather than raging against a person, they fight the good fight. It's more about battling back against a situation, poverty, discrimination, abuse, bullying, unfairness, abandonment, whatever the case may be. And I think that's really important because when people get into personal attacks, they've then lost the battle. We've seen that over the past year with all the political arguing going on Facebook and other places, that people start literally attacking each other. And at the point you're there, you are no longer accomplishing anything. So the better thing to do is to fight against situations, to actually go fight against problems and wrongs that are happening in the world, and leave the personal attacks out of it. That absolutely gets you nowhere. So the family heroes often have figured out how to do that. These super normal people, they have a strong work ethic. They're not afraid to work long and hard without immediate rewards. Even in the face of many setbacks, they are fueled by some original injustice. There's an unwillingness to be beaten, an impulse to fight for one's own survival and to better one's circumstances. They have an imperative to stand up for themselves and what's right. In fact, they usually feel they have no choice at all. They have to make it work. I think I've said this before. If I had to choose between having a strong work ethic and having a super high IQ, I would pick work ethic. Because you can get a long way with a strong work ethic. But if you are extremely intelligent and lazy, it's possible you will accomplish nothing. So work ethic is everything. It's awesome. If you can have both, even better. Okay, another superpower is that they believe failure is not an option. When they describe themselves, they say, I'm a fighter. I'm a survivor. I'm determined. I'm a scrapper. I'm tough. I'm strong. I never give up. I keep going. I do what has to be done. I'm driven. I'm a striver. I find a way. I pick myself off and brush myself off. I do whatever I set my mind to. If I'm backed into a corner, I come out swinging. Do you have that kind of mindset? If you set a goal for yourself and then go after it with that attitude, there's no way you're not reaching your goal. These people do not give up. Okay, another superpower, they have hypersensitivity to danger. I think this one's pretty cool. These supernormals, they notice when the environment is awry. They can use this power relative to their peers, their own abilities, their bosses, their family. It's almost like they have a sixth sense. It's like threat detection. They can basically read others' emotion and they have a strong ability to do so. I've noticed sometimes going through my life that there are certain people that seem oblivious to other people's emotions, and somebody is definitely hurt or sad or surprised or taken aback. I don't know. There's so many different emotions people have, but occasionally it seems like somebody's going down a course of discussion and then other people are getting upset. This happens for me only in real life, that I can see this course of discussion going and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're saying that. This other person's clearly so upset about it. But they keep going and I don't understand it. Like, why would somebody want to upset somebody? I definitely notice when people are upset or have some feeling that is like basically a negative feeling. All feelings are fine, but there's some that make you feel really uncomfortable or really nervous or upset. And those, I'm very sensitive to those. Your ability to read other people like that should give you a leg up when it comes to emotional intelligence, because emotional intelligence is basically being able to work with somebody and understand their emotions and then being able to understand your emotions in relation to their emotions, which should help overall communication in all kinds of situations. These supernormals, they're also shrewd observers of the world. They live in a state of automatic alertness. They are supremely attuned to subtle changes in the expressions and mannerisms of others. They're like a barometer. They are always gauging the moods of others. They're just trying to forecast behavior. This kind of goes along with the other one. There was a study of hundreds of famous men and women, and researchers concluded that success often came from not being in the right place at the right time, but from being able to recognize that you're in the right place at the right time. And the researchers said that often these supernormals have a slightly bigger amygdala, and that your amygdala is like your primitive brain, the one that kind of regulates, your very basic responses, such as fight or flight. The bigger your amygdala is, the more your primitive brain will try to control you. So a very sensitive amygdala helps us to pay attention to not only danger, but it also helps you recognize when opportunities happen. So they scan their environment and they look for chances to be safe, and they see chances where they could be happy. And then they bide their time until escape becomes possible. And usually that escape comes from spotting a school or a person or a job that'll take them somewhere else. And I thought that was pretty interesting, because in order to be successful, you have to realize that where you are isn't working. And then you have to scan your environment for places you want to be. And this is one of the reasons that these supernormals are probably high achievers and highly successful, because they have the ability to go look around and go, okay, all these other people seem to be pretty satisfied here, but I'm not satisfied. This doesn't feel good. This doesn't feel safe. This doesn't feel comfortable. I need to get somewhere else. And so they have the ability to scan and then look across the horizon and go, okay, this is my time. And then they jump to a place that is safe, that is good, that is better, that makes them happy. So do you feel like you have been in that place in the past where you're like, okay, I need to get out of here. And then you jump and it works? And is highly likely that your amygdala had something to do with that, of realizing that the place you were in wasn't working and the the place you were jumping to was likely going to be better. Okay, one thing that supernormals don't do, they don't make excuses. They move as much as they can away from being a victim toward becoming an activist. They redirect their energy from powerless toward purposeful. And this type of activity, moving on that spectrum from powerless to purposeful, that spectrum is often recognized as therapeutic for trauma people and for people with grief. Basically, you work. It's the single most important goal of traumatized people throughout the world, is to just try to get from the place where you can't do anything about it to the place you can do something, which will eventually make you get to a place where you can function and then hopefully feel better in spite of whatever tragedies occurred. And I just want to say that not making excuses and taking responsibility for your actions and being able to say, oh, nope, that was me. That is one of the most powerful places to be, and you will never have to feel guilty about that. You don't have to take blame for things that you didn't do, but you don't sit around and feel sorry for yourself. You don't say, well, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, so I guess I need to just go sit around and I can never work again. No, you figure out what you can do, you figure out what you're able to do, and you keep on moving forward. And I realized that multiple sclerosis, I have a pretty mild form overall. I've relapsing, remitting multiple sclerosis. And so that means my symptoms come and go for the most part, and they're worse sometimes than others, but I have long periods of really healthy time. So it hasn't been a gigantic impact on my life. And I realize some people have much worse situations, but you could even say being a single mom is like that. It is surprisingly hard to be a single mom with very little help. And that's how the first 5 years of my daughter's life was. It was very hard. And I didn't give up. I could have given up. I could have said, well, I'm a single mom. I have to get out of the Navy now. I could have said a lot of things, but I didn't. I could have given up. I could have went home. I could have done a lot of things, but I didn't because I wasn't going to make an excuse. I'm like, well, I made this decision. There was some decisions I made, and now I'm a single mom. So what am I going to do about it? And you don't become a victim. What I decided to do is more like becoming an activist. Like I will show people that you can be a single mom and succeed. That's what I did. And so, that's just an example of this, of not making excuses. In fact, one time I remember when I was in first class petty officer in E6 that I had a chief petty officer who's one rank higher than me come and yell at me because we were in charge of a bunch of junior sailors. And he told me, you make these girls think that they can be single moms. I'm like, well, they can be. I've been doing it for 3 or 4 years. And then he said, not everybody's you. And I'm thinking, well, I think sometimes people just don't realize they can. And so the easiest thing to do is to say they can't. And so I became kind of like an activist in that regard of, no, this is what I'm going to do. I'm not going to marry somebody or get in another relationship just so I have help with my child, because I was waiting until I was in the relationship that would actually be a good, healthy relationship. And that took me a long time. It took me until I was old. So I raised my daughter 100% as a single mom because I refused to ever get married again in a situation that was not going to work. And I would say that was me moving toward the activist side. And what did I do in that period of time? I worked my freaking butt off to make sure that we were both okay, and that any other mistakes I made along the way, any other situations I got myself in, we just worked right through it and made it better somehow. And then eventually it started to get better. So, eventually things got a lot easier. But that's the single most important thing that you can do, is just don't make excuses. Just look at your life and decide, you know what? I'm not staying in this mess. I'm getting through it. I'm going to make it better. I don't know how, but I'm not giving up. I am not going to be a victim. And I think that's a super powerful place to be. Okay, another thing supernormals do is they have the ability to visualize a future, and then they set about making it happen. So when we fantasize or dream about our future selves, and the more concrete and actionable your vision is, the better. What a family hero will do is they will set their sights simply on something in the future that's more specific. It could be a particular job. It could be a faraway city. It could be a nice, quiet, safe house. It could be a safe relationship, apartment with a doorman so that they feel more protected, a red car, a school that looks good. This is all the things. They get a vision, and then they just focus on that until they make it happen. And I talk about this all the time, and I know I have this. I think I told you in the last podcast about visualizing, that I've been doing this for my entire life. Even when I was in grade school or high school, that I would dream of things that I was going to make happen. And they were usually moving myself to New York City or Nashville or Los Angeles. I was going to go be a famous singer. I was going to move out of town. I was going to have a big mansion. And I would just sit there and write about that. And I would draw pictures about it and everything. But I spent a lot of time visualizing to make that happen. And then what happened happened as soon as I was able to as soon as I was old enough that I could leave town, I did. And now I try to be much more deliberate about that. And trust me, I have very strong visions about my future. And I have very strong visions about this 1 year, and then strong visions about 10 years and even 25 years, and even throughout my entire overall life, if it goes beyond that. So I just continuously do this. And now I believe I'm doing it from a much more beautiful place. I'm just doing it from a place of abundance and belief in myself and desire to leave my family a legacy. That's where it's coming from these days. But back when I was young and I was struggling and I had a more difficult life, I sometimes did it just from a desire to get to a place that felt better than the place I was in at that time. I hope that makes sense. And then supernormals, they also have a really strong sense of self-control. Self-control is the ability to direct your own thoughts, your own feelings, your own behavior, and it's usually in a way to adapt to a better world. It's sort of a catch-all for how, it's sort of, a catch-all for how well we resist temptation. We're able to delay gratification, if you're able to regulate your emotions, and if you can work toward what you want. Self-control is how we obey rules. We follow directions, we check emotions, we cooperate with others. You might exercise consistently, eat healthy, keep promises, save money, get to work on time, and by working hard. And people with more self-control are at a strong advantage for success and achievement. Self-control helps us not only to say yes to the work that's required in life, but also to say no to destructive behaviors that get in our way. Eating too much, drinking too much, drugs, spending too much time out at pre-COVID parties or nightclubs or bars or that kind of stuff. I mean, I understand there's a crowd of people who that's their thing, but that has never really been my thing. I think it's because I'm introverted, but it's also, I think it's the whole self-control. I don't like drinking too much, and I don't like the way I feel when I eat too much. And I've been pretty good about my self-control, and I'm way better at it at this day and age actually than I ever have been in my past, but there's been a lot of work that's gone into that. Okay, the whole strong self-control, the reason that also correlates to high achievers is because, and I've heard this and I think you may have heard it too, that sometimes the ability to succeed is the ability to keep yourself on a path. And whenever you first make a goal, it's super exciting. You can't wait to get it going. But you know what? Some days, let's say my goal is about a year long. My goal is somewhere between now and December 31st, I'm going to achieve my goal. And when I achieve it, I'm going to tell you what it was. Somewhere between now and then, I'm going to achieve it. And there are some parts required of that goal that are going to be so tedious. And I even think about it right now. I'm super excited about it, and I'm definitely moving out on it. But there's some parts of it that they're just plain tedious. I mean, honestly, even things like producing this podcast every week. And if you look back at my feed, I've missed a couple weeks. I try not to though. But I work a demanding full-time job and all this stuff still. So, but actually creating a podcast like this would be a good example. I set out to make a podcast. Then you think to yourself, the only way a podcast works is by continuing to release episodes and growing your audience. But I can tell you, I have plenty to say and I have so much information I want to share with you. But obviously, this happens to anybody. Obviously, some weeks I have a harder time than others writing the content, trying to figure out what I'm going to talk about in the episode. Not because I don't want to talk to you, but it's just because some days, research or reading, you may not be in the mood for it, or you may not feel like writing, or you may not feel like whatever it takes. If you really care about why you're doing something, that's what keeps you doing it. And that's what keeps you marching down the path. And so the same thing with my goal, with my 2021 goal, is that goal. There's going to be some tedious parts of that goal, but I'm going to do them. Why? Because that's how you get to success. The reality of it is the people who actually get to a place where they are very successful were the people who were most likely to keep themselves on a path in spite of the tedious steps that were sometimes required. It's not always exciting. It's not always glamorous. Sometimes there's just some hard work involved, and you have to have the self-control to keep yourself on that path. Let's start wrapping up this episode a little bit. There's really no more dangerous judgment about a childhood adversity than the notion that you are abnormal because of it. If you've had childhood adversities, you might be withdrawing from people, feeling uncomfortable. You don't want to be in the companies of others. You let people who are bad to you in your life, toxic people, people who hurt you, because you feel unworthy of anything else. You might collapse with relief into the arms of other normal people, only to find out that they are also not normal. They are super normal. They have problems too, because that makes sense. If 75% of the people have some sort of childhood adversity in their life, then there's really no normal people. Who likes normal people anyway? But here's the thing. Very often people with an unhappy childhood or a childhood that had a lot of adversity in it end up having adulthoods with adversity. You know how I explained, like I then ended up being a single mom for a lot of my life, and which could cause unhappy childhoods for the next generation again, which would be then 3 generations. So just remember that you're not abnormal. 75% would be most of the people. There's others who understand you. You should find somebody to talk to. Life coaches, therapists, friends, other family members that understand you, whatever. Find somebody to talk to. Dr. J says that sometimes she feels like she has an almost desperate urgency to convince people that contrary to everything they believe, they are not abnormal. They're super normal. They're the family heroes, and they are some of the most courageous, compassionate people, some of the best people she's ever met. Not in spite of the difficulties, but because of them. So that's why we need to keep in your mind is that you are special, and everything that you think has ever been hard or difficult in your life is probably what makes you who you are today. And you should, to the best of your ability, just realize that because of that, you are now strong and powerful, capable, and on a path to success. Then you should own your fighter within. You should be empowered by your ability to be strong and to get over obstacles in your own way. You don't need to feel bad about the times you've been angry. You don't need to feel ashamed for refusing to accept things how they are. This is how family heroes survive and strive. You should find and create some peace for yourself. Find your own peace in life. What makes you happy? Create that world for yourself. Find somebody to tell your secrets to. And if that person says the wrong thing, then find somebody else. Find people to love and to love you back. And remember that they come from all different backgrounds. If somebody didn't take good care of you as a child, then make sure that you take good care of yourself when you're an adult. Along with this, if you listened to the last episode, I talked about self-care. And Dr. J literally said so many of the things I actually already put into that podcast that I think I'll link that podcast in the show notes again and go listen to that, because now that you're here, you're on your path to success, you really need to take care of yourself. And I have so many good ideas in that episode. Some hurtful relationships will improve with time, but a lot won't. Many of them won't. Go ahead and make amends with people who have hurt you if you want to. If you think it'll be helpful, then go ahead, give it a try. But if it's only going to give you more heartbreak, you don't have to. You can stay away from them. Avoid relatives, partners, or old bosses who have a high potential of re-traumatizing you. And go ahead and make something out of your present so that your past does not seem so large. And also resist the temptation to compare your hardships to other people's hardships, your hardships to others' successes. If you have children, be the parent that you wish you had. And as often as you possibly can, just be good to yourself and to all those you encounter. It might be true that not everybody you meet is fighting a hard battle, but as Dr. J said in this book, up to 75% of the people you meet are. You don't know what other people are going through, so do your best to be kind to them. Okay, this book, again, is Super Normal by Dr. Meg J. It is so good. You will love it. There's so many stories and examples and just so much great information about what to do with your life if you've been one of these people. And it's absolutely packed with tons of great information. I think it will definitely solidify that you are not alone in this world. It's a great book. Please go read it. Okay, we've come full circle on this episode about the story we tell about our past. You heard my story at the beginning. If you listen to it, it seems like, wow, that was a really bad life, but it wasn't really that bad. Here's how I prefer to tell my story now. And if you go on the website, genuinedrivenwomen.com, which is where you can find my website, all my blog, how to work with me, other things are on that site. But if you go to my about page on genuinedrivenwomen.com, then heavily this is the story that's there. I grew up in a small farm town on the Colorado Plains in the 1970s with a community who took care of each other, but also held fairly traditional thoughts when it came to gender expectations. I was surrounded by extremely hardworking people, farmers, oil field workers, tradesmen of all kinds, and other people who made our community a home. Most of the educated women, like my stepmom, were teachers or they worked for the local school district. Like my mom, she worked for the school district. As a result, I wanted to be a first grade teacher when I was in high school. I just didn't know what else to want. My mom was absolutely the hardest working person I ever met. She was driven in a way that I just can't explain. She climbed and clawed and scratched and climbed until she was the financial supervisor for our school district. And then eventually she continued her ascent and rose to an executive position in the Department of Education for the state. I was amazed by her drive. And the higher she climbed, the higher I knew I could climb. She created her entire portfolio of success through sweat, blood, and tears, working harder than anybody can imagine, and overcoming obstacles that women today can't even begin to comprehend. I'm so proud to call her my mom. My mom lit a fire in me that will never be extinguished. I owe it to her and all the tough women from her generation who paved roads to success that were not available to us, even as recently as the 1990s. In 1990, I decided to join the United States Navy. I enlisted after graduating from high school, and during the first 10 years I was in the Navy, I completed my bachelor's degree and received a commission as a naval officer. I eventually completed my Master of Science degree, majoring in Computer Information Systems Management, and I retired after a successful naval career of almost 24 years. I learn new things every day, and I'm continuing to grow and learn just like all of you. And I would love to share my thoughts so you can continue to grow and improve on your journey as well. The young girl who grew up on the Colorado Plains and who dreamed of being a first grade school teacher, she didn't even know the career I have today existed. It's been an amazing journey, and the adventure continues. I look forward where we will all go together. And if you want to hear more about my single mom days, I put a link in the show notes for a better story on that. So if you're one of the 75% of the people who've had a lot of adversity in your childhood and now you're on your path to success, as I said at the beginning, the power of forgiveness, understanding, and grace for others has really got me where I am today, along with all of the powers that I think I gathered along my life. I hope that someday you're able to tell a different story about your past, one that fuels you, one that motivates you, and one that gives you peace. You can connect with us on Facebook at Genuine Driven Women, or to learn more about what we offer, check out genuinedrivenwomen.com.